Bartholomew. What could an intelligent, human, open-minded man do in mid-16th century Europe? Keep quiet, work in solitude, outwardly conform, inwardly remain free. The wars of religion evoked a figure new to European civilization, although familiar in the great ages of China, the intellectual recluse. Petrarch and Erasmus had used their brains at the highest level of politics. They had been the advisors of princes. Their successor, the greatest humanist of the mid-16th century, retreats into his tower. It was a real tower, not the ivory tower of cliché language. This man who retreated into his tower was Michel de Montaigne. He was a fairly conscientious mayor of Bordeaux, but he refused to go any nearer to the center of power. He preferred his tower, where through his window, in his own words, he enjoyed a far-extending, rich and unresisted prospect. There is my seat, there is my throne. He was born in southern France in 1533. His mother was a Jewish Protestant, his father a Catholic. He had no illusions about the effect of the religious convictions released by the Reformation. He said, in trying to make themselves angels, men transform themselves into beasts. But Montaigne was not only detached from the two religious factions, he was slightly skeptical about the Christian religion altogether. He said, I would willingly carry a candle in one hand for St. Michael and in the other for his dragon. Actually, he was thinking of a picture of his patron saint that hung in this room. His essays are as crammed with quotations as are the tracts of the warring priests. But instead of being texts from the Bible, they are quotations from the authors of Greece and Rome, whose works he seems to have known almost by heart. He had his favorite quotations written on the beams of his study. And the one above my head says, Homo sum humani a me nihil alienum puto. I am a man, and think that nothing human is foreign to me. He used these texts, as the Reformers had used the Bible, to find out the truth. But it was a concept of truth very different from that which serious men had sought in Collett's sermons or Erasmus's New Testament. It involved always looking at the other side of every question, however shocking, by conventional standards, that other side might be. Burning a candle both to St. Michael and his dragon. It was a truth that depended on the testimony of the only person he could examine without shame or scruple, himself. In the past, self-examination had been painful and penitential. To Montaigne, it was a pleasure. But as he says, no pleasure hath savour unless I can communicate it, and in order to do so, he invented the essay, which was to remain the accepted form of humanist communication for 3 centuries. These self-searchings really marked the end of the heroic spirit. As Montaigne says, sit we upon the highest throne in the world, yet sit we only upon our own tails. The strange thing is that people on high thrones didn't resent Montaigne. On the contrary, they sought his company. Had he lived, his friend Henry IV might have forced him to become Chancellor of France. But he preferred to remain here, in his tower. Such was the egocentric isolation that the wars of religion forced on the most civilized man in late 16th century Europe. But there was one country in which, after 1570, men could live without fear of civil war or sudden revenge, unless they happened to be Jesuit priests: England. England, which was almost untouched by the visible signs of the Renaissance, which had little painting and no sculpture, but had developed a fantastic architecture of its own. I suppose it's debatable how far Elizabethan England can be called civilized. Certainly, it doesn't provide a reproducible pattern of civilization, as does, for example, 18th century France. It was brutal, unscrupulous, and disorderly. But if, as I've suggested, the first requisites of civilization are intellectual energy, freedom of mind, a sense of beauty, and a craving for immortality, then the age of Spencer and Marlowe, of Dowland and Bird, was a kind of civilization.